All right, I guess we're starting then. Ali, a pleasure to meet you. I have heard so many amazing things about you, so it's great to actually have a one-on-one session to ask you directly questions, as well as I've also went through your book as well, and it's actually really interesting to take it from I guess an American who moved to Pakistan and is building in Pakistan, and I'm just reading through your stories of what you went through in Pakistan, and now your journey is now quite the opposite, right? Like now you're living in the US, you've been building in the US. So super excited to interview you. But before we start, if you could just share with the group, with an amazing group of 60 participants, a little bit more about yourself and I guess like what inspired you to write the book and what you would want us to take away from it as we go through our conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. It's great to be here, and thanks Ali and Paklaunch for hosting. You guys do the best webinars and chats in the Pakistani startup community for founders and investors and everyone connected. So thank you. It's great to be here. I've done a couple of sessions on the other side, Rebecca, as a moderator. So this is my first one getting interviewed. So it'll be fun. But it's really cool that you've done the opposite. I'm real curious to hear about your experience as well. I grew up there and I was there till high school, till I was 17 in Karachi. Um, but to your question, I wrote the book. The book is, written primarily for other founders who are building also, and who are, still early stages, pre-product market fit. They may or may not have some revenue, and they're searching for, what's going to work. And that part is the hardest part, of doing startups and the least written about. So most of the startups advice out there is like, okay, how do you hire the right people? How do you find the right growth investor? How do you do go to market here? How do you build a team, the right culture? None of that really matters early on. And so this book is written for them. It's just a collection of stories. We didn't want to write sort of another how-to business book. So it's just a collection of, all of the things I did wrong and a couple that I did right. And, to show that that's really what the typical founder journey looks like. It's like 98% of your days are spent doing things that don't work and fail, and, you just got to keep going.
Yeah. But before we continue, can you sort of when every founder is looking to take feedback or listen to another experience, I think it helps set the stage a bit of, if you could share a bit of your achievements, just so that everyone has the general setting.
Sure. I've built and sold two venture funded startups here in the US. The first one was called Peanut Labs. We raised about 4 million, sold for 30. The second one was a startup called Streamlabs. We raised about uh, uh, 25 and sold for 170 million to Logitech. And I'm doing a third startup at the moment called Pilot GPT. It started its life off as something else, but pivoted a few times, as is, true to the book, true to form. Um, and that one has also raised money with A16Z and others. So that's the high level. I've also invested in a bunch of startups. So about 100 or so startups, some venture funds, and I also am a mentor at 500 Global, 500 startups here in the Bay Area.
Right. So what I'm gathering from this is that your main inspiration to write the book was basically looking to little Ali a long time ago when he was trying to figure out PMF, when he was sort of figuring out pivots multiple times and trying to, I guess, make sense of the mess and figuring out his compass through that period. Because I'm a founder myself, so when I went through your book, this obviously spoke very loudly to me, right? So I do also want to kind of understand what were the I guess, pivotal pivots that sort of also inspired writing the book? Like, which collection of stories did you decide to share? Because I'm sure you have way more that you could have shared, but you picked these specific ones for other founders who are in the early stage period.
Um, yeah, part of the motivation also was, I've wanted to just chronicle these stories for my kids when they grow up. They're young right now, and um, maybe in 20 years I'm not going to remember many of these stories. So putting pen down to paper. And yeah, there are a few stories that, we either forgot to include or were left out because they didn't seem as important or so not all the pivots are in there, for sure. Um, and I guess the criteria was fairly subjective. It they were the pivots or the circumstances that felt the most meaningful to us. So myself and my co-founder, who's also my brother, we've done all our startups together. His name is Murtaza. Um, um, so to give you a couple of just examples and stories, um, the first I was in college at Williams, and the first
Right.
startup was we were competing with, it was the early days of social networking, and we built, uh, um, this is like Facebook had less than 1 million users and like really early, 2004-ish. Um, and we built some campus events website. That got some users. We eventually built a competing sort of Facebook clone that managed to get to a few million users in a few weeks.
Where you guys have built the bot to slurp up as much information from Facebook to get them onto your platform, right?
Yeah, yeah. I had a friend who had figured out like a really interesting viral loop for like a different product called
Mhm.
Birthday Alarm. It was Michael Bebo, who eventually also went on to start Bebo, which was another big social network that was acquired by AOL for 800 million. Um, And he had this viral loop where you could add email addresses, import email addresses from like another service, like let's say your email, Gmail, or another social network, or your IM list, and then you could add people as friends on like a
Yeah.
new service. And then people would, if they get an email from somebody saying, so and so Rebecca has added you as a friend, you want to accept yes or no? The response rates on that typically tend to be very, very high, right? At least in those days where like social networks were still new, right? There's no Instagram, there's no like TikTok, there's no uh and Facebook at back then allowed you to export an email list of all your social graph, right? They were like, okay, it's your data, they're your friends, clearly, we're going to let you export at least a list. And so we allowed users to import that list. We made it really easy. And you could add them as a friend on our social network, which at the time was called Zuka, it rhymed with hookah because my brother loved smoking the hookah pipe, the shisha.
Yes.
Um, that got, several million users, became the largest social network in Turkey, um, parts of the Midwest, in the US. Um, and Iran for some reason. We don't know why. For like a year and a half to 2 years, it was the number one social network in those regions.
Maybe it was the hookah sounding part.
Yeah, yeah. Um, maybe, who knows? They certainly smoked the pipe there. But it was also bigger than Facebook and MySpace and Friendster in North Carolina, in Charlottesville, and sort of Greensboro. There's a triangle of like these three cities where we were bigger. Um, and um, we didn't have money to pay for like all of the servers that were needed, and so I was a student at college. I didn't know what venture capital really was. And so I was on a meal plan and or scholarship from the college, and I was like, okay, well, you don't need to give me room and board, right? I will just figure food out on my own. Just give me a check for the food, right? And so they give me, I don't know, couple of $1,000 back, which we used to pay for like the early servers, and I just ate at Subway like the whole semester. So I'd buy
Mhm.
like a $5 foot long, and
The
then
foot
cut
long.
it in half, and half of that would be lunch, and
First
half
half,
of
yeah.
that would be dinner. Yeah.
Yeah, Tuesday.
And we ate ramen, and this is one time during spring break, we everyone else went home or on vacation, and there are a bunch of rich kids at the college, so they were all on fancy vacations. um, and I had a third co-founder of Prosper, and we all just stayed on campus in the computer labs working. And this one time, you know Prosper fell asleep in the computer lab, which was while working. He would work and then he'd like doze off at 2 a.m. and you're sleeping on the floor. And he is a black guy, and so campus security came by and thought we were all homeless people hanging out in the
Trying to take
computer
you
lab.
out. Yeah.
So there's a picture of that in the book as well. We put in some pictures to add some more context to these stories. Um, but anyway, fast forward, Facebook started essentially. They were already far ahead in terms of number of users, and so network effects started kicking in, and they started killing off all of the other social networks. So there were maybe about 20 around the world that were popular in various countries. Um, and
And you had also mentioned in this story that you felt you had not reached true virality. So why is that the case? Like, how did you quickly determine that?
Yeah, so Facebook basically shut off their email importer tool, right? Which shut off like our biggest source of new users. Like people were still adding their friends, they could still import from like their Gmail, um, but growth slowed down. The VCs were like, okay, we think they had told us that, look, just figure out user growth. Don't worry about revenue. Don't make a single dollar of revenue. We're going to fund it. You just have to figure out how to grow. Great. We were still growing. We were, in the sort of 5 to 10 million user range, which back then was significant. Um, and then suddenly the VCs were like, well, we think Facebook's going to win, so we're not going to fund anyone else in the space, right? And we had 2 weeks of cash left, and we had to figure out a pivot really, really quickly. It was 2 weeks of payroll.
And this
Which
is what
was
you had called as some of the dark days, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think so in the new days, sort of been doing startups for give or take 20 years, and building as a founder. And almost every single year, there's like a oh shit moment where like the company could have gone under,
This is it. This
right?
is the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, every single year, like there's a big customer that goes away, you run out of money, VCs don't want to fund you, the investment climate turns. Retention is terrible. People are leaving. Something breaks. Um, and it's funny, whenever I've hired people coming in from big companies, they come in and they think, "Oh my God, it'll be so fun," and like I'll get to work on like, yeah, and they come into a startup and they think, "Oh my, this is all held together with a bunch of bandages."
Yes. Yeah. So, I think one big lesson that I have especially learned from Pakistani entrepreneurs is the level of resilience that you have to kick off at, right? Like I think you were talking about when you were in Karachi that your servers would constantly go down, right? So that whenever you had to save a document, it would just be basically a prayer that it would actually save, right? So you have to start learning how to quickly work with constraints. And I think where this really ties back into the world today, we're dealing with more high frequent changes like COVID or what happened with Silicon Valley Bank that affected all the founders, or even right now, what's happening with the GCC. And I think what's becoming more important is that the strongest founders are going to be those with the biggest sort of resilience muscle. And I think Pakistan definitely helps prepare you for that. And I think one key point you shared in or I think one of your someone who was introducing the book had shared was that you and your brother are the fastest to get over failure and get through processing like the next pivot. So I guess that's kind of like the grit that I want to like sort of like really dive deep into is like how do you figure out those signals and how do you like mentally push through the failure where it's like you're not even emotionally processing it, right? It's like it's such an objective thing. This is the way of the world. Okay, this is what I need to do next. This is the pivot, you know?
Yeah, that's the heart of the book, Rebecca. That really
Yes.
is. It's and there are a lot of emotions, right? So it may seem like, in the book there's so many pivots that we've been through that like sometimes we only spend like a paragraph talking about them and then we're off to the next one. Um, and it may seem like it's all objective, there's no emotions, but there's a lot of emotions, right? Because for everything you do, you put a lot of care into it. You sell
Yes.
yourself first on the idea, then you sell your employees, your team, then you go out and get customers, you sell them on the vision. And often a lot of them are buying like early versions of something that isn't even good
That
or
doesn't
ready,
exist.
right?
Yes.
So there's a lot of credibility on the line. There's a lot of like, um, and you lose optimism every time you lose energy every time something doesn't work and you have to try something else. You lose faith, belief, the team loses energy, and so on and so forth. And I think, what really helped me kind of get through all those things was having a co-founder. I think doing pivots of any kind, even one pivot or two pivots, let alone 10 or 20 or 40, is you need a co-founder. You need a co-founder that is there with you not just intellectually but emotionally.
Hmm.
And For me, I was really lucky. That was my brother. We've been doing our startups together for since we were in school. But I've also had, co-founders that were not so great, right? So the few times where I did not work with my brother, um, you know, I had this one guy um, who was my CTO, and we had just laid off most of the team with a pivot, right? And like they were hired for this one particular product, didn't work. It was awful. I had to lay off all of like 20 people. Um, and then it was just me and him, right? And after I do the layoff, like, you know, he tells me like I'm also like I can't deal with the stress anymore. And
Hmm.
like this is too much and like I don't think this is for me. I kind of want to go do something else. And so he left as well. And that was probably one of the lowest points uh, in my startup journey, startup career. Um, is a co-founder leaving, right?
Right.
Um, And with my brother, I haven't had that. So I think finding like somebody who's going to be with you, stay with you through thick and thin, especially when things are not great, is a great quality to look for in co-founders in your first 5 or 10 hires, um, and your investors, right?
Hmm.
So I've seen bad investors who are, really happy when things are up and to the right and are terrible when things are not, right? They disconnect. They either yell at you or they like disconnect emotionally. Uh, um, you know, uh, they're not really engaged. They're not really helping you with introductions or anything. Um, so have a co-founder. There's a bunch of other things. Take care of yourself. Good sleep, eating, exercise, meditation, um, purpose. You've got to have a reason other than money that you're doing your startup. So I talk about a few of these in the book, but you've got to have the more of these you have, the better. It's like layers that will protect you.
And it sounds like, um, you're averaging about 13 pivots per startup. And one thing I know very well about pivots is when you have to frame it to your team. As you said, you have to sell your first the when you decide on a pivot, the first conversation you have is with yourself. Like, why do you want to do this pivot, right? So I guess my question is like, what is your framework for when you decide on that pivot, when you convince your co-founders on that pivot? How do you sort of think through telling your team about it, telling your startup, telling your investors, telling your market? Like, how do you sort of quickly sell on that pivot when if you're averaging about 13 pivots per startup, it's like where what is this pivot frequency like? Like what are you going to be selling me next? So how do you sort of like instill that conviction as you go through these multiple frequency of pivots?
Yeah, it's, there's a great quote from Dalton Caldwell. He used to be a partner at Y Combinator, and now he's running a VC firm. That startups don't die when they run out of cash. They die when founders run out of optimism.
Hmm.
And you can substitute optimism for energy, right?
Yes.
Um, which I think is completely true. Startups don't need cash to live, and they don't die when they run out of cash. They only need sort of founder energy, and they die when founders give up. When founders run out of energy or optimism, it's over. Um,
Yes.
and so I think that has been the most useful heuristic in kind of figuring out what to work on next. Um, and yes, if you have some questions coming in chat, uh, 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 Rebecca, I'm sure we'll get to them later, but um, find what gives you energy as a founder. That's really it sounds so subjective, but like it's really the most important thing. So where I've made the biggest mistakes are things that logically make a lot of sense, but like I don't really care about them.
Yes.
So I'll give you an example. When I sold my first startup, the next thing I started, the second startup started off as a peer-to-peer sports car rental company, right? So kind of like high gear, sorry, Turo or Get Around, but
Or
for
like
like high-end sports cars, because at that point in life, I was really into cars, right? That was the logic. There's no, and
if you drive now,
I'm a family man now, so nothing, just a bunch of
okay.
Tesla commuters.
Okay.
Um, but we had 400 Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Porsches, like you know, BMWs, Mercedes on the network in the Bay Area, and that business got up to $1 million in revenue. Um, and then we had a bunch of cars stolen on the network, and it was
The whole
horrible.
fleet, right? I think it was the whole fleet.
Yeah, they hit up so many cars across the fleet on the same afternoon. So it was an organized criminal gang. They stole a bunch of cars. I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. I have to go to my friends who've put cars on the network and explain to them what happened. And like cars are getting trashed. It's only a matter of time before there's an accident. Somebody dies in one of these, you know, cars being cars. And the unit economics were terrible on the business. So we pivoted out. Um, but Turo in that space has succeeded, right? Like they've become a decacorn and doing fairly well. Um, but that was a case of like I should have listened to my heart, not my head, and kept going. Um, and then we ended up testing or sort of going through two different things right after that car rental company got sold. Somebody's unmuted, I think.
I'll mute him. No
Thank you.
worries.
Um, but a bunch of the things we tested after that, I didn't have any emotional connection to. So like we tested, subscription boxes, a bunch of e-commerce ideas, WordPress themes. I don't even remember, like random crap.
Mhm.
Um, so it's very, very important for you to have an emotional connection as a founder with whatever idea you're going to work with. Um, right? You have to have an irrational kind of emotional connection to the problem, if or the customer or the market. for you to keep going when everything is like, this is not going to work?
I 100% agree. And for those founders who sort of operate in, I guess, more chaotic environments, what sort of sharings would you impart with them?
Um, Sorry, what was the first part of the question?
I was saying, and for specific founders who operate in more chaotic environments, everything that you've learned about quickly pivoting, how do you determine when is that a pivot or when is that like a market reaction? Like, how do you know when this is a founder pivot? I don't know if I'm
From
explaining myself.
from the point of view of a founder, or from the point of view of an investor?
So, for example, when it came to your luxury car business, right, you probably reacted to a very specific signal. You didn't react to you kind of already mentioned how you wish you kind of you would have stuck it out a bit, and because you've seen the success that Turo has had. But how do you distinguish that sort of like signal and noise? Like over time, you've done 3 startups, 40 pivots, so I'm sure you have figured out how to hear like that founder signal even better, right? So I think maybe in the beginning, founders are a bit unsure because they're reacting more to a market signal when they should really just maybe double down, right? So had if you had to look back at that decision at that luxury car decision point, how would you sort of rethink through that? Like, what do you think you reacted to that made you sort of pivot versus now you're thinking you should have doubled down on it?
Yeah, I'll share one more story there that is helps answer that question. So one
Okay.
of the other pivots was, an esports team. I was a gamer most of my life, and I loved video games. And specifically, I would watch competitive video games like StarCraft before Twitch and before like it was a thing. And we ended up putting together an esports team as one of our pivots, right? I um, brought got some players together. We put them together. They participated in the League of Legends championships back in 2013. It was the first year they put that series together. They finished as a top three team for a couple of years, right? And at the time, I was still trying to figure out, okay, what software thing I'm going to do? Like, what is the next product? Blah, blah, blah. We're running a bunch of experiments. Um, And everyone told me like, look, this is not a startup, this is not a business, right? And so a year later, after I put the team together, it cost 15 grand. Um, I sold it a year later for like 150, right? And we're like, okay, fine, we got some money back. A top three team in the LCS a year later, after that, after I sold it, was worth about 10 million. A year after that was worth about 100 million. A year after that was worth about 300 million, right? And teams were getting bought and sold sort of at those prices. So they're real transaction prices. Everything was telling me, this is not a business. There's no software. It's like a coaching thing. You have to have a bunch of kids kind of perform well. It's like a sports team. There's no business here, but like the enterprise value on those things was just off the roof. And ultimately, they did turn into real businesses. So I should have listened to my head rather than my heart rather than my head is the sort of moral of the which is the same as the car car story. Um, and um, because when you're in the trenches, you don't really have clear signals, right? So like when I was doing the car thing, we didn't know Turo was going to become huge, right? Turo was tiny, same stage as us. Um,
They even went through a rebrand too at some point, I believe.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Um, And so looking back, I think when you're in the trenches and you don't really know, listening to your heart in terms of like, is this something that is incredibly exciting for you or emotionally charging for you? If it is, that's a great heuristic because if you're having that reaction, chances are there's other people that also have that are having that reaction, and hence it's probably a good place to be. Um, versus I think just putting up like the exact polar opposite of that is just putting up a bunch of landing pages and saying, okay, let's throw some ads at it, see what converts, and then we're gonna pick the highest converting one, whether it's selling shoes or ice cream, I don't really care. We're just gonna make a business out of this, right? That's the opposite. And I've done that too, and I've lived too long in that part, on that part of the spectrum versus this.
So you're saying it's better to go through the dark ages, pushing for what gives you motivational capital versus just chasing money, just playing with landing pages, experimentation, and chasing money is basically what you're saying from all of your experiences.
Yeah, yeah. And it's okay to pivot if like an idea truly is not working, right? But really, I think the way you should pick ideas and the way you should spend time on them is what gives you, I think, to your point, motivational capital.
We have about 90 participants now, so I think I'm going to answer some of their questions before people get antsy in their seats. So I'm going to go a bit from the top. Um, from Ali Fahad, probably he brought this in from someone, but his question is, how do you navigate the transition from a small project to a venture-backed company in Silicon Valley?
That transition happens, uh, it will happen naturally. Naval has this saying where, like, if you do something truly impactful, your network will instantaneously emerge around you, right? So if you do something important, um, people will come out of the woodwork. And when we were doing the social networking site, we were getting a lot of users. We were college kids, had no idea, knew nobody in Silicon. I didn't know what Silicon Valley was. Um, and this VC found us because they were using traffic monitoring tools to kind of figure out what things were spiking, right? So they had a very quantitative approach to finding apps and websites that were blowing up, right? And so they found us, they sent like this analyst over to meet us, and the analyst, you know, our college was so rural, this person got lost, couldn't find out where we were, and eventually somehow found us. And then they're like, you got to move to California. And I was like, what's in California? And they're like, you just have to come here. And we did. And so I think if you do something, again, impactful, meaningful, doesn't matter where you are. You can be in Pakistan, you could be Asia, you could be Europe, you could be South America. There are great founders everywhere. Um, you know, People will show up to help you, to support you, to invest in you. Um, um, that's been my experience.
I agree. And I think I see that more in like concentrated areas of I guess entrepreneurship like Silicon Valley than other places. So I definitely agree with that. Um Another question is, what are the main takeaways you want everyone to, I guess your specific target audience to come away from your book? For me, it's the importance of motivational capital and really driving into it to help sort of manage burnout or help you figure out the difference between your head and
The other sort of the big takeaways are don't give up, right? When the book starts with like this meme. If you're a gamer, you probably seen this where take my energy, which is like this meme fans give to like players when they're playing, and they're like, take my energy and win. Um,
finish for me. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, keep going. That's the big one is like, look, all the shit you're seeing is totally okay and everything will turn out fine and just find a way to keep going. There's this other popular startup advice where people, I forget who said it, but they say, just don't die, just don't die. Just keep going and you will get through the dark days. Um, yeah. Uh, Everything you're seeing as a founder is totally powerful. Of course, it's funny. Last week, a friend reached out to me as a founder friend. He had read the book and he's like, Ali, we have to have like, I have to meet you. And, this is a person I haven't seen in 10 years or 5 years or something. And he was telling me his own story, and he started a startup in 2016 and did a thing, failed, pivoted, raised money for a new thing, failed, pivoted, and twice somebody was interested in buying them, right? And for like a smaller transaction, and then he was like, no, no, like investors basically convinced him not to sell and gave him some money, and like then the business went to shit, and he's like, Ali, I don't know what to do. Like this is, I wish we could have sold the company, Um, and but anyways, like your book really hits home because like we're still in the trend, building and like maybe it'll work, but it's very much the it was very much his experience.
Hmm. Yeah, then I definitely have been to the cemetery of startups as well in Silicon Valley and have heard all the horror stories of like for every successful person you find, you'll also see hear about their 100 most horrific stories. And I believe success definitely does come at a cost. And great that I say that because I would love to segue to another question is what is the psychological cost of that performance of constantly pivoting? And how does the founder stop the pretending tax from draining their ability to actually fix the problem?
Yeah, the tax is high, the psychological tax, um, and also related the health tax, the well-being tax, right? The tax on your family. Um, I've heard lots of stories of like people breaking up, getting divorces, breaking up with significant others, developing health problems. Towards the end, like I talk about this in the book also, I was starting to develop health problems also, right? Um, so so the long-term effects of chronic stress, of pivoting, of doing startups is very, very high. And I think um, the way you get through it, I think, is again, like really have good self-care routines down. Um, Try to have purpose for what you do. Um, often for me, purpose was doing it for my team, like not giving up because everyone else is in the trenches with me, and we're gonna get through this together. Their jobs were dependent on the startup. They kind of trusted me with their careers. Um, I also pledged to give some of what I made to charity. So that for me was like a motivator as well. For it gave meaning um, to what I was doing to get through tough times. Um, and so you just have to find your meaning, whatever it is. Um, but the tax is high, and unless you deal with it, um, it will impair not just your ability to execute, but also like most people give up after one or two pivots or failures. Um, I think anecdotally something like 50% of founders give up after the first pivot, like first fail, like the first idea they started with didn't work. They're like, okay, I'm done. And then 50% of those that remain give up after the second pivot. So a lot of people like cannot pivot. Like it's very, very, very hard. And the first idea is almost guaranteed to fail.
And I think it's a lot of it does have to do with that burnout, and many founders don't even realize they're in that burnout stage until maybe they jump on the scale and they notice that they gain like 10 kilos, or they look in the mirror and all of a sudden they don't recognize themselves. It's like when you wake up every moment to something that's happening within your business and you're going to bed just exhausted from it, it's very, very hard to sort of keep yourself as a well-oiled machine and to be conscious and cognizant of the changes that are happening. I'm sure that when you were going through health problems, it took you a while to realize that you were having those health problems as well. So what sort of advice do you have for founders to ensure that they have, I guess, the Sub-Zero alarm that will go off on like a founder's sort of like own mental health care system?
Yeah, great question. And weight gain and binge eating is like a telltale sign that something is going wrong. I've done it many times over. Um, it's just binge eating is something that is so common when people are going through stress, right? Or poor eating. Um, find or build a resilience practice. So, for me, that is some combination of meditation, journaling, um, light daily exercise. Doesn't have to be like an hour of powerlifting or whatever. It can be just take a walk, do some yoga, do some stretching, um, get your body in that right frame of like, it'll be okay. Everything will be okay. Um, and there's a few places I talk about this in the book. Is like there's layers to resilience you have to build. Like any one of these is not enough. Um, Another good one is build a community of other founders or friends, right? Um, because sometimes maybe your co-founder is not going to be enough. Your partner or spouse is usually like sometimes if you get super lucky, they're going to be super supportive and be able to understand what you're going through. Usually it's one of the, they may be very supportive, but they may not understand what you're going through, what you're really going through. And and so having a community of founders you can just hang out with and just shoot the shit with and just commiserate together, you can be therapy for each other. It's funny, I actually have a Slack founder group of friends, and it's called Founder Therapy.
Very much needed. Another question we have is with your background in Pilot GPT, how do you advise founders to use AI to scale their outreach while avoiding the salesy LinkedIn vibe that investors can sniff out a mile away?
Yeah, so don't care about what investors think. Investors are useless. They are completely and utterly useless, and I say that as an investor as well. And you know how investors are like, "Oh, we're super value add. You should work with us. You should work with us." My experience is, look, I've worked with Sequoia, I've worked with A16Z, I've worked with like 20 different VC firms, and I've worked with hundreds of angels as a founder, but I've also worked with hundreds of founders as an investor. So like one of the pivots we did was like stonks, right? Which is like fundraising during COVID when everyone was stuck at home, right? Demo day in a box, like essentially on Zoom, right? And in our best year in 2022, we moved over $100 million from investors to founders in a single calendar year. Like that's
Wow.
equivalent to like a multi-billion dollar AUM firm deploying at that scale, right? And we had 1,500 founders who raised capital on the platform in a single calendar year. So I saw hundreds of these, right? Investors are useless. Do not listen to them for the most part. Um, Most of them are not value add. They're not even value neutral. They're value negative. Okay. Because there is a cost to maintaining, an outside cap table, right? You have to have reporting, board meetings, you have to blah blah blah, or maybe audited financial, blah blah blah, right? So there's a real cost to doing it, and um, investors should never know more about your business than you do. Um, um, so sorry, I think I got a little sidetracked with the investor tangent there. But going back to your question. Um,
I think
Uh,
founders trying to find a way to raise capital for their business in the world of AI and LinkedIn. I think that's pretty much what the question is about.
yeah,
And
Yeah, so for
I
Pilot GPT specifically in AI, I think it's a great time to be building in AI. I think we're still early. I think there's a lot of overinvestment and in the short term, but it's like what Paul Graham says. This is, I think, one of those like cases where um, this is not this is overhyped in the short run, and there will be a crash, but it's underhyped in the long run. Over like a 10-year horizon, this is probably still underhyped, and we're still like very much in the first innings of where this is gonna go. So, um,
everyone's still trying to figure out how to use it, how to implement it, how to like actually create value out of it. So
yeah, and the reason and the way we ended up here is so random, is we spent, the startup, the third startup spent 4 years doing fintech, right? Stonks was one of the ideas. We did pre-IPO investing with Sandhill. We did a bunch of other sort of Roth IRA for kids, sort of custodial bank accounts with Charles Schwab, blah 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 blah. So it was all fintech, and I just kind of got sick of it towards the end. And we were like, okay, well, AI is exciting. And my brother is a pilot, right? He's a hobbyist pilot. He's been flying for maybe 3 years, and he had this idea a few years ago. We kind of never looked at it, but it seemed to give him energy.
mm.
And again, going back to motivational capital, going back to that could be a great name for a VC firm.
I love it.
Uh, uh, his head over heart. We're like, we don't know anything about this, but one of the co-founders is a pilot. He loves this and would be cool to work on it. And it's certainly very differentiated and unique. And YOLO. Uh, that was the thinking. And
Okay.
I think as long as you're excited about it, you'll probably be able to get a good year out of working on an idea. Versus like throw up a landing page, throw traffic, see the conversion rate. Gets you maybe like a month of motivation.
I actually think AI is actually a huge sort of ramp for motivational capital, right? Because it helps non-technical founders figure out how to do technical things that they couldn't do before. So when you would have an idea and your CTO would or your technical co-founder would shoot it down because you wouldn't have the bandwidth to act on it. Now more than ever, we have the ramp more for that pursuing that curiosity that gets us excited about what we want to build or how we even want to pivot, right? The cost for pivoting is lower as well compared to before. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, agree. Very much agree. And I think that's more true today.
Another question is, oh, and if you want to add maybe a question to the audience yourself, like let's go ahead and play around with that if you maybe you have a specific question you want to ask.
Oh, that's a fun one. Um, if you're a founder, for the founders in the chat, um, why are you doing why did you start your company?
Okay, guys, Ali just asked for all the founders in the chat, why did you start your own company? What motivated you to build your own company? Maybe there are no founders in the chat.
Yeah,
Okay,
Rebecca,
go,
can you hear me?
yeah, we
Yeah,
can hear you.
so somehow the chat is disabled. I don't know, is it intentional? We are not able to post the questions. But since you asked, anyway, we can ask the question here, or you think we need to type it?
I mean, if someone can verbally express it, that would be better.
Yeah, can I ask quickly because I was not able to type?
Oh,
So
yes,
actually,
please do.
yeah, my name is Ali, and I work for a corporate. I don't want to state the name. So I want to ask Ali the question, what is your perspective on building a startup alongside a corporate role as a risk mitigation strategy? So under what condition does this approach make sense?
Yeah, I mean, startups are all about mitigating risk. So I started in college, which is another great way to do it when your room and board is taken care of, and you can do just enough to pass on classes without failing. Um, uh, you can do it while doing a job, but you really will have to be extremely motivated to kind of sacrifice nights and weekends to do it. Um, and having a timeline that says, okay, I'm going to give this 1 year and get to some revenue, and then I'm going to quit my job, is helpful. I think without some kind of timeline or hard deadline and milestones, it's easy to kind of just do a little bit, like 3 times a week, and be building for the sake of building, but not going anywhere.
Thank you.
And I think we also have Ubaid who raised his hand.
Hello, Ali. How are you?
Hey,
All right. So my name is Ubed, and I am a rising sophomore, currently pursuing a bachelor's in computer science. So I had this product within my mind for the past like 2 to 3 months, and then just keep on evolving and the pivots we have to take. So right now we are building an educational platform, particularly for students and for teachers, to solve the data science problem. So as we all have came up across this thing that while we are growing, we have a lot of report cards, we have a lot of student data, but somehow we have not utilized the data itself. So how should we proceed on, like as in terms of the investment from not from the investment point, but from the user validation point and everything else? One of the biggest problems we're facing right now is getting that manual data in form of more of a digital data asset, and it's going to be very much difficult for us to put those things into scannable formats and then putting it up in AI. So what do you think? How could we eventually solve this data problem?
uh, you know, um, you just have to be resourceful as a founder. Founders kind of have to be find like shortcuts or ways of kind of hacking it or doing it. And by hacking, I don't mean literally hacking. Um, but as a founder, you just have to be resourceful, call up friends who work at companies, if they can share documents or data that is not confidential, like sales collateral, for example. Um, Go online, script like Scribd or LinkedIn for like presentations people share. I don't know if using AI to generate synthetic data for is all that useful, but yeah, I don't have an exact solution, but you'll just have to be super resourceful. But the good thing is like as a student kind of studying computer science and tinkering with this is like literally the best possible thing you can do, because what we're seeing on is hiring for entry level computer science graduates has collapsed. It's completely collapsed. Because people are using cloud code and other tools to kind of replace junior engineers, and to effectively increase output from senior engineers, right? So hiring for junior engineers has gone down. So the best thing you could do is as a fresh uh, student coming out of is to become top 1% in your use of AI tools. That is going to get you an amazing job, or help you start an amazing business, either during college or after.
Thank you so much.
But that's absolutely great advice, Ali. 100% is what I also tell my engineering team too, is that you have to learn how to use AI. There is no 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 other option at this point. There's another cool question from the chat I wanted to ask. We also do have 5 minutes left, so I do also want to address like other pieces you may want to add. But how has your personal tech stack for running a company changed in the last 12 months, and which tool has given you the highest ROI on your time?
That's an easy one. I mean, I think the tool with the highest ROI, if you ask my team, is going to be is Cloud Code.
Or your own personal tech stack?
For my own personal tech stack, I have not installed the Lobster on my machine yet because of like security. Like you'll buy a separate Mac Mini for that. Um, I use I kind of use my personal tech stack is sort of A/B testing constantly between different leading AI chatbots and models, and seeing who's the most useful for various things. So, when I was editing this book, I would ask for suggestions for all of the AI bots on like, this is this kind of voice I want, this is my style. Edit this and make sure this is in my style, right?
Right.
And all of them would have different outputs. Um, Gemini has actually been like surprisingly good. So like my stack ranking over the last year is sort of Gemini for like personal stuff or um, for most things, and then Claude for coding, and then ChatGPT is now sort of in third place.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I haven't dramatically changed my stack, personal tech stack, like in the last year, outside of just AI tools. There's Cloud Cowork, which is really interesting to play with. There's OpenClaw, but it has security trade-offs in running it on your own machine.
Yes, that's probably one of the biggest concerns as well. Okay, do you want to ask aloud for one more question from the crowd, Ali?
Uh, Actually, there's a question here on how can we get the book? So the book is available on Amazon globally, um, and if it isn't, if they don't ship to Pakistan or it's too expensive or takes too long, you can get the ebook, which is the PDF or the Kindle version also for like $1.
Yes.
Um, we've kept it purposely like super cheap. I'm not looking to make money on the book. It's more about sort of sharing energy that keeps you going and keeps founders going, knowing that look, it's going to be tough and it's pretty par for the course. It's pretty normal. Um, I've if your face doesn't physically change from doing a few years of startups. Like if you're not physically getting wrinkles and like gray hair or like hair loss or like you're not doing it right, you know?
Some of us
So
will pay money to make sure this doesn't happen.
yes, some founder will solve that problem also.
Yes. So Ali, after many of these founders, as you see, there are also many young people who are interested in your work. What do you hope your book will inspire the next wave of founders? What do you hope they come away with it? What do you hope that they really focus on? You know how the world is changing. So you wrote this book to inspire many founders. So what do you hope happens? What is your wish?
Keep going. Don't give up. The startup is only dead when you give up. Even if you've run out of money or don't have money, capital is not necessary, especially with sort of the extreme leverage we now have with AI tools to kind of build and launch. Like, look, if you're motivated, you can build and launch a production application or a website or a tool in like 3 days, on a weekend. Um, Even if you don't know how to code, right? Like, just go on Lovable, Replit, or any of these tools, and you can launch something in a couple of days. If so you really don't need capital. So keep going, don't give up. And then I think I'd love to add a little bit of think about how you can give back to, to the world, to the community. Once, you hit product market fit or hopefully you'll be very successful in your careers. Everyone here, think about how you can give back because um, I think we're not there's a part of us that we're sort of spiritual beings going through a physical experience, and at some point sooner or later, like everyone hits that realization in their life, and the more that you can give back and help others in whatever shape or form makes sense to you, big or small. I think that's where a lot of the fulfillment and rewards are. Like, you would be surprised how many depressed founders there are who sell their companies and exit for like millions of dollars. They're still depressed. In fact, I'm part of this group called Post-Exit Founders, where literally everyone has sold their company for more than 50 million and or higher. Like that's the criteria baseline. And they do annual retreats and conferences on kumbaya therapy because everyone's depressed. Literally, they're like webinars and Zoom sessions on what should I do with my life? What is the purpose of my life? My founder at my partner at Sequoia was this guy called Umar Hamoui, and he sold his business to Google for like 800 million. He was telling me like he was just depressed, and he for 2 years he sat at home watching Netflix and playing video games, and I'm like, what? How is that possible? Like, what? This is what everyone on the planet dreams of, like, that level of success. Uh, uh, and now that I've gone through it, I'm like, yep, that's the other side of the hill. And it's completely true. So if you do not have a bigger purpose in life, you know, you will feel like your journey is only half complete.
That's very beautiful. Thanks for sharing this, Ali. So Ali Fahad, we have reached the 60-minute mark. If you want to add anything else, please feel free.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And especially Rebecca and Ali and the Paklaunch community for putting this together. It's always a fun time, and you guys are amazing.
Thank you. It's been fun moderating, and I'd love to hear from the chat, love to hear from everyone. And Ali, thank you so much for writing this book and also sharing these learnings with founders around you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.